Hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. April Bolton, and I am Dean of the Graduate School here at Hood College. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to our Cotton Cybersecurity lecture series. We will be starting here momentarily, but first I would like to share a couple of housekeeping rules or expectations, if you will. We have our featured speaker tonight who will be delivering a very engaging lecture for about 45 or so minutes. At that time, we will be taking questions from the audience. If you are new to Zoom, you will want to look for the Q&A. It's a little Q&A icon in your Zoom console, and feel free to enter your questions using that particular feature. I will do my best to collate similar questions and pose those to our featured speaker tonight at the end. And our event ends around 8 o'clock. We are also streaming live on the Graduate School's Facebook page for those of you who are interested. Unfortunately, if you choose to engage with the lecture via the live stream on Facebook, you will not be able to use that Q&A feature to pose questions to our featured speaker tonight. So with that, it is my distinct pleasure to officially welcome to the podium, our Zoom podium here, Dr. Debbie Ricker, Provost of Hood College. Debbie.
April, I'm having a challenge starting my video.
Well, let's see if I can help there. Try now.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, April. I appreciate that introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, let me also extend my welcome to the John C. and Janet Hobbs Cotton Cybersecurity Lecture Series at Hood College. On behalf of President Andrea Chapdelaine, who's unable to be with us this evening because she is teaching a graduate class. On behalf of President Chapdelaine, myself, and the entire Hood community, it's my honor to welcome you to Hood's campus, albeit virtually. Those of you who know Hood well know that spring is a special time on campus, and there's no better time for this campus to shine than in the springtime. And I know we're all looking forward to the day when we can be back on campus together and next year join together in person for this very lecture. Before I introduce our speaker this evening, I'd like to extend a personal welcome to some of our esteemed guests who are joining us via Zoom tonight. First, let me welcome members of our Hood College Board of Trustees, both current members and former members, as well as members emeriti who have taken time to join us this evening. Thank you so much for being here. I'd also like to welcome members of our Board of Associates who are also attending this evening, and ironically also have a meeting this week with us on Friday. So look forward to seeing those folks twice this week. Thanks for being here. We're also honored to welcome our elected officials from the Frederick community this evening. Thanks so much. It's been a difficult day in Frederick, and so we appreciate your time being here with us this evening. And I'd like to also welcome our colleagues and partners at Frederick Community College, as well as Mount St. Mary's University, with whom we have worked so closely to build a cybersecurity pipeline between our three institutions for our students. And so to those students from FCC and the Mount, and to the faculty who have joined us this evening, thank you for your time, and thanks for being here. Most especially, I'd like to welcome John and Janet Cotton and the Cotton family. Without the Cotton family's generous support, this lecture series would not exist. And we have been so honored to have their support of our students and this graduate cybersecurity program for several years now. And their support of this lecture series has been instrumental and pivotal to the success of this cybersecurity program. So to John and Janet and the entire Cotton family, thank you for being here this evening, and thank you for your support of Hood College and our students. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker this evening, Mr. Kevin Stein. Kevin is the Chief of the Applied Cybersecurity Division in the National Institute of Standards and Technologies Information Technology Laboratory, or ITL. He is also NIST's Chief Cybersecurity Advisor and Associate Director for Cybersecurity in NIST's ITL. In these roles, he leads NIST collaborations and industry, academia, and government partnerships to build trust in information systems and technologies by advancing cybersecurity and privacy standards, guidelines, and measures. He oversees the development and practical application of cybersecurity and privacy guidelines, tools, and reference architectures in diverse areas, such as public safety communications, health information technology, smart grid, cyber physical, and industrial control systems, and programs focused on outreach to small businesses and federal agencies. He led NIST's efforts to develop the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and served as past chair of the Federal Cybersecurity and Privacy Professionals Forum, which promotes sharing of cybersecurity and privacy practices among federal agencies. Prior to joining NIST, he was the first Chief Information Security Officer at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, where he served as the FDA's principal cybersecurity official and senior advisor to the FDA's Chief Information Officer on strategic and operational cybersecurity efforts. It's my honor to welcome Mr. Kevin Stein as the Cotton Lecture Series speaker this evening. Mr. Stein, welcome to Hood College.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much, Dr. Ricker. I appreciate that very kind introduction and warm welcome. I'm hoping my slides are showing.
They look great, Kevin.
Perfect. Okay. I think in the interest of managing bandwidth, I'll keep my video off for now and just share the slides, and then I'll certainly turn that on at the end for Q&A. So again, Dr. Ricker, thank you so much. As you were summarizing my bio, I realize I'm very fortunate to have and work with such an outstanding and committed and a group of experts at NIST. Quite honestly, they make me look good and make my job very easy day in and day out. I'm very thrilled to be, in my mind, more of a servant leader than anything else. I also wanted to take a moment to thank April and team for really helping me over the last year, kind of sticking with me, not just in the last few weeks in preparation for this, but certainly in the last year, kind of keeping this opportunity alive for all of us. And definitely last but not least, very much appreciate kind of your forward-leaning perspective and your support to make this outstanding lecture series possible. I think events like these play such a critical role and really provide that critical platform to amplify community awareness of the cybersecurity challenges that we face, but I think just as much the tremendous opportunities that we face as well. It was a highlight of my night, just an hour or so ago, where I got to spend about an hour with probably 25 students and faculty, just before this. And, it's such a highlight anytime we can talk with students. They offer such different perspectives, some interesting perspectives and thoughts, and quite honestly, as individuals and as likely parts of future organizations, their view of technology, their view of cybersecurity and the challenges that we face, and really the opportunities. Again, that word opportunity, I'm an optimist, as the title suggests. It's always very refreshing. They had some great questions and even some zingers in there, just to keep me fresh and on my toes. So, and I think just being able to work with the students and talk with the students is one of the reasons why I'm always very energized and always very optimistic about the cybersecurity space. So again, it's a pleasure and honor to be here, to be able to spend some time with everyone tonight, albeit in a much different way than we had hoped a year ago. We tried this last spring, and I think we even considered it in the fall. And unfortunately, that didn't work out for obvious reasons. So my planned title last year was going to be True Confessions of a Cybersecurity Optimist. And there's certainly a lot that's happened over the last year that really can shake our sense of optimism as individuals and as academic institutions, as companies, and even as nations. But I opted to keep my title as is, again, because I am an optimist by nature. So let's reflect briefly on kind of where we've been over the last year, just very briefly. I mean, we have an ongoing response to a pandemic that's definitely challenged and affected the resilience of public and private organizations, of each of us as individuals, as families, as communities. And, thinking about, how so many organizations made that transition overnight, really overnight. I mean, I can remember being at NIST on a Friday. I want to say it was March 10th, if you will. And then, by that Monday, I was entirely virtual, remote workforce. So kind of transitioning over the course of a couple of nights on a weekend from that traditional in-person work environment, and in many cases, educational environment as well, to a nearly 100% remote environment. And that certainly has challenged us all at different times, on large scales, as well as on very simple scales, like just learning how to manage these different virtual platforms and figuring out where the mute button is or the video button is, for example. And I say at the same time, of course, over the last several months, we've had very high profile and high impact vulnerabilities and hacks that have affected public and private sector organizations and critical infrastructures. And that is an unfortunate reality of the situation we're in now and have been for quite a while. So maybe the only true confession I'll provide tonight is I am by nature an optimist. In fact, too many years ago, when I was, I want to say it must have been 8th grade, I was voted most optimistic in my yearbook's 8th grade, student superlative. And, for many years, I kind of held that as a badge of honor, if you will. And one day it dawned on me, was I voted most optimistic because I truly was the most optimistic, or just because I wasn't the best dressed or the most athletic or the most likely to succeed, or even privileged enough to be the funniest to be voted the class clown? I'm not sure. So I'm just going to stick with having the privilege of being the most optimistic and not overthink it too much. So with that, now my slides are advancing, so that's a good thing. So it's important, though, to not kind of confuse my sense of optimism with the reality of our current cybersecurity situation. I think we're reminded frequently, all too frequently, days, weeks, of the hack of the day or the breach of the week, where we hear about the latest vulnerabilities in different products and technologies or services that we use. Of the organizations that provide those services to us. I think too many of us are very familiar with our personal information, which, being out there, getting those letters from our bank and credit card companies and healthcare providers, for example. Sometimes our personal information doesn't even feel like our own anymore. But I think despite these frequent reminders, I still maintain my sense of optimism. I still have that excitement about problem solving. I still really love and appreciate seeing that early stage research that's being conducted that's really leading to new and cool and innovative solutions and approaches that are really they're being developed to not only help address today's challenges that we're experiencing, but I'd say also providing that foundations on which other innovations can occur, in the future. So I've been fortunate to have worked at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, for the last number of years. Gosh, probably going on 15 years now, I think, if I'm thinking right. We have a mission of promoting innovation and industrial competitiveness through standards, very simply put. And one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about NIST, the organization's purpose and the culture, has really been that sense of optimism. When you become a new NIST employee, it's encouraged that you have some required reading just to prepare, so you understand the organization you're kind of walking into and becoming a part of that NIST family. I guess it was in the early 1950s, from early 50s to late 60s, we had a NIST director, and at the time it was not NIST, it was the National Bureau of Standards. So NIST, we had a director, Alan Aston, just a very influential director of NIST, as they all are, but he was faced with some very specific challenges that really kind of challenged the organization, kind of the integrity of the organization, if you will. Maybe a fun fact for those kind of movie and TV aficionados. So Alan Aston was the director of NBS at the time. He was also the father of John Aston, who, for those of you who remember Gomez Addams in the iconic TV show The Addams Family. So you got that. And then, of course, he was the grandfather of Sean Astin. I'll date myself a little bit as well. So Sean Astin, some of you may remember him as the lead in the Goonies movie. And for those of you that are maybe students now that were probably not alive when Goonies came out in the mid 80s, Sean Astin is also Bob Newby in Stranger Things. So maybe a little pop culture, past and present for everyone there. So anyway, get off of that soapbox. So in May 1953, Alan Aston gave a speech to the American Physical Society, and in that, some of the events leading up to that point in NIST history, or NBS again, had been very challenging. And that speech, despite those challenges, that speech really had an overwhelming message and sense of optimism on talking about NBS, about its employees, kind of the tradition and the shared beliefs of NIST, of its employees, and simply put, why we do what we do at NIST and the value that has. So when I kind of cherry picked a few lines here. When you read words like, we believe that there is romance in precision measurement. We know that the Bureau's work is critical in the nation's scientific and technological progress. These are very powerful words, kind of really describing the ethos of the organization, if you will. And we take a lot of pride, and really that stems from this organizational sense of optimism. So whether it's finding the next decimal point of accuracy in measuring time, or whether we're, for example, conducting this bleeding edge research to develop the next generation solution to a global challenge, or maybe making just that incremental advancement in a technology that's going to make it easier for some organization or some individual to apply a standard or a technology in a meaningful way. It's really this belief that something can be better, that something can be improved upon in an optimistic way, and really having the drive and the perseverance to do that. I really think that optimism is critical to progress. It's really necessary for progress. And in the cybersecurity space, we've got a lot of progress to make. I think the other kind of core, attribute, if you will, that we hold very, very tightly at NIST, we're very endeared to, is this notion of building trust. You're going to see some different quotes similar to this one, kind of sprinkled throughout many of my slides, and I'll give a plug to one of my colleagues here at NIST. That really focuses on that intersection of human factors and usability with cybersecurity, creatively usable cybersecurity. Really a recognition that the human is a part of the system, and we should be a champion for the human in the technology and in the cybersecurity space. So you'll see quotes kind of built in here that really stem from some research that they've been conducting through a series of interviews with folks that are both in and out of the cybersecurity and the technology space, to try to get their perspectives on this discipline, this domain, really with an eye towards understanding, what makes a good security advocate for an organization or a community, for example. So that's the kind of the source of many of these quotes. Trust is really kind of that core tenet, if you will, that really provides us with that foundation in all that we do at NIST. This is really our anchor for the decisions that we make, whether it's in some of the traditional sciences, in the chemistry and the physics and the material measurement, or it's in the cybersecurity and the privacy space. Our drive for building trust, for cultivating trust in systems, in information, in systems, in technologies is really what keeps us moving. And it's not hard to see areas that we're already seeing progress in. Without a doubt, we're definitely living in very exciting times. And when I say that, I really do mean it, and very much in a positive way. When I was young, I remember, and you're going to think I'm a TV junkie, by the time we're done here, but I can draw a line to TV in any conversation. When I was young, I remember watching Saturday morning cartoons, and again, I'm happy to say at the time I was actually watching reruns. The originals were aired even before I was born, but I was watching Saturday morning cartoons, and I like to watch the Jetsons. And maybe some of you remember the Jetsons, but they had this is a futuristic life for a family, lots of technology. Excuse me. when they had transportation, the flying vehicles were taking the kids to school and the parents to work. The way they did their work was really, embracing robots and automation. Essentially they would go into work, they'd push a button, and then the robots would take over, and they would kick back and put their heels up on their desk. With those robots performing most of the professional and the household tasks. So I always think about, they were ahead of their time, if you will, in terms of kind of a vision of the future and the way we embrace technology. So thinking about that in today's context, today, just for perspective about, in many ways, how exciting these times are, and how full of possibility they are. I'd encourage you to take stock. So I read an article recently in Forbes magazine, just within the last couple of months, actually might have been, probably December timeframe, that in 2020, up to the point of the posting, there was an estimated 10.7 billion invested in cybersecurity and privacy startups. And that wasn't even the full year. That was probably through the October, November timeframe, if I recall correctly. So that there's just an exciting, eagerness to invest in new and innovative approaches and companies that are kind of trying to bring those to development and to the market. The average amount of seed money was for those individual startups was way up over past years, if I recall the data. And I think according to the same Forbes article, there was this, the average round of funding kind of for those startups was in the range of kind of that 15 to 20 million range. So just a lot of excitement, a lot of innovation happening, and a lot of desire to invest in those new and innovative approaches and capabilities. Those innovations are happening across technology platforms as well. It's not just in the traditional information technology or the IT space, which many of us are very familiar with and use every day in both personal and professional lives. But it's also in the operational technology space, those control systems that are running our power grids and helping the maritime sector and the transportation space be much more effective and embrace those technologies. And in those operational technology space, we're all, again, very familiar, much more familiar and comfortable with the IT focus in cybersecurity, but that operational technology, brings some unique considerations where we have to really tailor our approach to cybersecurity so that we can accommodate, the unique control system performance and reliability and safety requirements, beyond just the traditional kind of IT-focused confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We bring a whole lot of different dimensions, unique dimensions that come to play in the operational technology space. We're all very familiar. We hear the kind of the buzzword, if you will, around IoT, Internet of Things. Probably well beyond a buzzword now. It's very commonplace. IoT and connected devices. We have, some of us have a little, game at NIST, if you will. Who can find the most kind of off the wall, interesting connected device. And I think right now the current reigning champ, at least in our internal efforts, is the smart belt, which can, I guess, has a sensor on the belt buckle, something along those lines, and it can adjust, tighten or loosen depending on, I guess, what that sensor's picking up. So I can imagine it be coming in very handy around Thanksgiving time, for example, or other, holidays where a lot of food is at play. But just the number of connected devices and IoT across, both the personal and the kind of in the industrial space and the business space and government space, quite honestly, is just astonishing. And you've got, advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning. At NIST, for example, we are doing quite a bit of research in the artificial intelligence and the machine learning space. And we think about that not just in terms of how do we secure AI, but also how can we take advantage of the power of AI to help benefit cybersecurity. So kind of looking at it from both sides of that coin. Whether it's in things like fraud detection or malware detection, for example, or scoring risk in a network, something along those lines, understanding the human and the machine kind of behavioral analysis, if you will, maybe some of those, potential application spaces, kind of, things that I think we're starting to realize now, but certainly more research opportunities there as well. You look at innovations across different sectors, in the healthcare space, and I think this has become very evident, especially over the last year, with a significant increase in the embrace of telehealth and remote patient monitoring, using technologies that the patient has, maybe in their house or on their body, for example, that can provide, diagnostic information or information to support diagnostic decisions and monitor their health status in different ways. So kind of taking advantage of those technologies, even looking at, personal protective equipment for first responders, of which there are, in many cases, technology aspects to that, and certainly depending on the environment in which they're operating, cybersecurity and privacy considerations as well. Transportation, another exciting sector where you've got cars and other modes of transportation that are really, increasingly like computers, where you've got large numbers of sensors and a lot of data that's being analyzed very quickly, so that you can make, microsecond decisions. As vehicles are communicating with each other, they're communicating with the infrastructure in which, the roads and the other transportation infrastructure, for example. I think in the education space, just looking again, much like healthcare, looking at the last year where we've lived through a lot of this ourselves, it's really demonstrated the resilience with that move to remote learning. And, how's that going to evolve, over time and inform and influence and maybe change the way we train folks, we educate folks, students at all levels. And, maybe, one of my favorite sectors, if you will, is in the agriculture space, where we think about, connected animals. I've read about, IoT for cows, where using sensors to monitor cattle, things like cattle movement or, cows' behavior during the day and their feeding status. Those are things that provide very useful information to allow, farmers and folks in the agricultural space to make more informed decisions, use the data that's available to them to make more decisions, informed decisions on how they're going to operate and deliver those, services, those goods that they're producing. And we're also seeing these trends and innovations in the cybersecurity space. And I think that's very much a reason for optimism as well. There's this broad move to a zero trust architecture, embracing those principles of zero trust, where there's a recognition that the traditional perimeter of our organizations, this outer wall, if you will, network wall of an organization, protects the GUI middle, through the use of things like firewalls and intrusion detection systems and those types of capabilities and technologies. But a recognition that, the endpoint, whether it's the laptops or the desktops or the servers or other connected devices, is really where a lot of the data resides and where a lot of the processing of that data is. So how do we kind of change the way we view that definition of a perimeter and move that kind of out to those endpoints, and having a zero trust environment? We talk a lot about people, process, and technology, and I think that's a very common model that's applied to many different domains and certainly applicable in the cybersecurity space. And I think cybersecurity really requires that multi-pronged approach, especially as we embrace a lot of these new and innovative technologies and apply them in interesting ways. So it's definitely exciting times for sure, but you really do need to understand the technology. And I think, as we understand the technology, and both its potential and really, I think it's realized applications today, we also have to understand the cybersecurity and the privacy implications of their use. And with that understanding, we do seek to apply existing and in some cases devise new approaches that are going to help us to meet those challenges, really embrace those opportunities. And I think trust is really a key to that solid foundation, and that's really something that we really try to embrace at NIST. How do we build that trust environment, that trust foundation, through standards, by advancing standards and practices and really measurement science in ways that will allow for that practical application and that innovation to occur. And we do this in some very critical or foundational areas, not least of which is cryptographic technologies, with mobile computing and e-commerce and kind of that proliferation of those connected devices that are bringing tremendous benefits to our lives. We still need to be in a position to protect the individuals, protect the businesses, protect the government from the risks that these technological advances bring. And to do that, we really need strong cryptography, including in areas like identity and access management, not just of people, but of things, knowing that those people or those devices are have the right access to the right resources at the right time. Being able to properly identify the people, being able to properly identify the devices, and in some cases, the processes that are running on these technologies, and manage their access to systems and to information in meaningful ways. And identity and encryption are very much necessary as we, as sectors and as organizations begin to migrate towards that zero trust, architecture and principle. I think in trustworthy networks and platforms, really seeking to, increase the security and the privacy and the resilience of network systems, by resolving some of the systemic vulnerabilities that are in place, today based on the kind of the current protocols that have been adopted and implemented, longstanding implementation across the network. So how do we get a better understanding of those challenges, those gap areas, really develop potentially disruptive technologies, if you will, and approaches to really improve the trustworthiness of future networks. And I'd say the same on the platform side, where we have hardware and software platforms and products and services that we use each and every day in our personal and professional lives. And as we kind of continue as a community to, in some ways, decompose many of the newsworthy hacks over the last several months and the attacks and the impacts that those have had on us, how do we get a better sense of kind of the quality and the security of those development methodologies and the development tools and the environments that are used to develop those hardware and software, products and capabilities, really improve the security of those and the resilience of those through greater research and the application of standards and practices. And maybe a final area that we're increasing our attention on is really through cutting-edge mechanisms to strengthen privacy. It's a challenge to design and operate and use technologies in ways that are kind of meaningful or mindful, if you will, of diverse privacy needs of all of us as individuals and in some cases nations and cultures. So how do we still at the same time allow organizations to take advantage of the cutting edge technologies that are in IoT in that space, but that potentially are raising additional concerns about the impacts on individuals and their information, the individual's privacy. So how do we build customer trust by supporting decision-making in product and service design, for example, really getting down to that notion of, how do we engineer privacy? How do we know that we can kind of go from the higher order privacy principles down into something that we can actually implement? And how do we know that we've gotten there in a product or a service or a capability, both as consumers as well as individual consumers, as well as organizational or institutional ones? I think really helping to bridge that gap between higher order privacy principles and the practical technical approaches and services and capabilities. And then having the appropriate measures and metrics to help improve the quality and the utility of the information that we need to support decision making. And really, NIST as a measurement organization, this is critically important. But ultimately, as we need to view and embrace all these technologies and the associated security capabilities that we talked about in the context of a mission or in the context of a business objective or of a purpose, if you will. And we have to have this view through the lens of risk management. It's really about understanding the value of the data, the information, the functions, or the capabilities you're providing, understanding how those are used, and then understanding why someone else may find that valuable as well, then identifying the most appropriate mechanisms that can help to protect those resources and functions. And then being able to, in a position, if you will, to detect when things could go wrong, and then really to respond and recover when those things might happen. We all make risk decisions every day in our personal lives, just getting up and going outside, driving to work, whatever the case may be, or going to school. We're making conscious decisions. Our risk tolerance certainly plays in there. And certainly maybe you're making cybersecurity and privacy risk-informed decisions as well, thinking about what connected technologies you might use in your homes or that you might wear. What services you use online, who do you share your personal information with, and how do you communicate with friends and family? What are the tools and technologies you'd use there, and what are the cybersecurity and privacy considerations within them? But ultimately, cybersecurity is a risk management issue, and it really underlies all of the thinking and the decisions about what's appropriate in cybersecurity in terms of how we as organizations and as individuals prioritize and then take action. But this can't be done in isolation. When we think about, just like individuals, all organizations are managing risk, and they do this every day in the context of their missions and their business objectives. whether it's, and you can kind of go around the wheel here. You've got, financial risk, insecurity and privacy risk, technology, political, reputational, compliance, whatever the case may be. There are many different disciplines and kind of domains of risk. All are critically important individually, but none of them can be viewed in isolation. And that's really where this kind of broader enterprise risk management approach comes into play. How do we view and kind of reinforce the importance of not only understanding each of these dimensions, including managing cybersecurity risk, but also view those in the context of the enterprise? What is the impact of a cybersecurity risk decision on the organization's overarching mission and its ability to accomplish its business objectives? And those business objectives in many cases are not purely cybersecurity, unless you're a cybersecurity company that's providing a cybersecurity product or service. You have a unique mission and business objective, and that may be, your decisions may be informed by the impact on your revenue, increasing revenue or decreasing your costs, or maintaining your current customer base or increasing your customer base, or your placement among your peers in your industry or sector, and even in government. We have to view cybersecurity through the lens of a risk management approach, and really not just, again, in the context of cybersecurity, but in the context of the broader risks that we face each and every day. And one of the major things that challenges us today in the cybersecurity space, especially in this risk management domain, is speaking the right language about risk, speaking the right risk language. And I think that's something that we're challenged with each and every day, about how do we best bridge this risk communication gap. And I think these two quotes here, again, from some of my NIST colleagues and the research they've done on security advocates, really help to kind of reinforce the importance of this language that we speak as cybersecurity people. Cybersecurity is a highly technical field, and we do have our own language, and it's really not always easily understood by others that aren't cybersecurity professionals. We like to frequently joke that, us cybersecurity people, we're great at talking to other cybersecurity people about cybersecurity. But it's when we try to talk about cybersecurity to others that are not like us, for example, that things begin to break down, that communication gap begins to widen. And it's critically important that we begin to learn and continue to learn and refine the way we talk about cybersecurity using a language that is meaningful and understandable, and it will resonate with our audience. So if I'm talking to someone in the healthcare space, a doctor or a company or an association, for example, I'm not necessarily going to be talking about the bits and bytes of security technologies and the latest malware and those types of things. I may talk about those, but try to position those in terms of the impact on their ability to deliver the best care to patients, for example, or to leverage the technologies that are at their disposal to help improve the quality and the care for the patients as well. Being able to put it in the context of your audience's mission and business objectives is key. That's very much a role that we try to play, and it's always a journey for us at NIST, is really how do we equip organizations with the tools to help better understand, manage, and communicate cybersecurity risk in the context of an organization's mission and business objectives. I think one of the most exciting trends, and it's been a long time coming and there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think one of the most exciting trends I see is this movement towards cybersecurity being much more of an executive leadership issue, where we have boards of directors and trustees that are actually talking about cybersecurity. May not always understand exactly what the technical lingo is, but understanding that it will have an impact on the products you develop or use, or the services you provide, whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit or an educational institution or a government agency. Being able to talk about cybersecurity in the context at that executive leadership level, where those true mission decisions, risk decisions, are being made each and every day, is such a critical and exciting trend to see. I think much of the risk communication gap today is really between, again, like I mentioned, between the cybersecurity and the non-cybersecurity people, if you will, just very simply put. And that really speaks to the need to really have the right workforce with the right skills. I think when you think about kind of the workforce demand and the workforce gaps, maybe I'll call attention just to the title of this alone: preparing a workforce for cybersecurity. It would be much easier to say preparing a cybersecurity workforce, but when you have this word cybersecurity first, that usually draws people's minds to kind of the more technical role, for example, and the folks that are kind of fighting those technical battles on a day in and day out basis. But when you think about a workforce for cybersecurity or workforce knowledgeable of cybersecurity, it's not just the technical cybersecurity folks or the policy folks, but it's the acquisition professionals that are helping you to buy products and services that will have an impact. And they need to understand security in their role. It's the human resources folks. It's the business process owners, and it's just as importantly the executive leadership. How do we prepare and grow and sustain a workforce for cybersecurity that can safeguard and promote our interests as a nation, and the economic security and prosperity as well? I think the first two numbers are pretty daunting, but at the same time, it's also one of the reasons why I'm an optimist, and especially particularly excited for all the students and others that are here tonight, because there are tremendous opportunities in this broader cybersecurity workforce. And I think even in the DC metro area, which I think based on this site, CyberSeek, which we were thrilled at NIST to be able to help support and support the development of. Even in the local DC metro area, which includes Frederick, just a significant emphasis on significant demand fields in the cybersecurity space. Looking at just some of those cybersecurity job titles that show up in job postings and openings in this space, of which there are about 78,309 to be exact, based on the last time I checked. So just tremendous opportunity. And an exciting time for students and others that are seeking to either enter this field, fresh out of their studies, or folks that are, maybe considering career change or upskilling or reskilling to enter a new field, new and exciting field. Just tremendous opportunity there. So what are we doing about that? What are we doing about those workforce challenges? I think there's a lot of great examples, and I think here the we is collective. Certainly NIST has a role to play, but I think we all have a role to play as educators, as certification providers, as employers, and even as future employees. What are we doing to prepare and grow and sustain that workforce? We try to do our part, but this really is a community challenge and requires a community approach. I think this Cotton Lecture Series is just a tremendous resource, and it can play such a powerful amplifying effect or role on community awareness about cybersecurity and really the opportunities that are here. I think we're seeing tremendous increase in K-12 and higher education. Again, the program here at Hood and working closely with Mount St. Mary's and Frederick Community College and others in the community is just outstanding. And we want to continue to see more of those. In the K-12 space, it's always exciting. Like, we see more and more schools, including in their, curriculum, if you will, financial literacy, for example, learning the basics of, what it means to spend money, to have money, to spend money, those types of things at all levels. And we're seeing increasing, embrace of cybersecurity literacy. How do we model, good digital behavior, if you will, at all levels? This becomes real for many of us, especially as we become parents. I can remember back, my daughter would be so mortified if I shared this story, but I'm going to do it anyway because I don't think she's listening. When she was probably four years old or so, go back a few years. We had one of the early releases of the iPad, and just had very simple, four-digit passcode if you wanted to use it at all. And just trying to be a good, responsible parent. Wanted to monitor when in this case our daughter was online. We had a passcode on that. And one day she was walking around and she had it unlocked, and I was the only one home. So immediately my mind went to, oh, Dad's going to get in trouble here when Mom gets home. And so I asked her, how did you, get into the iPad? She said, oh, I just typed in the passcode. And I said, oh, can you show me? And she typed in 1234. And, for a moment, I was a proud parent. It brought a tear to my eye because that was her first hack. And at the same time, there was a little degree of disappointment that, gosh, I'm in this field and here we are with a very simple passcode. So just a little anecdote there. I think increasingly this is not just about the K-12 and higher education, but it's also very much a regional and an international opportunity as well. We're thrilled to see increasing numbers of higher education institutions become national centers of academic excellence in cybersecurity, where they focus on cybersecurity education, cyber operations, cybersecurity research, different areas of interest as well. And even regionally, I think there's tremendous value in taking that regional approach that really bands together local education institutions as well as local employers to really connect the local workforce supply and demand. We've been fortunate in this to be able to support a number of those through a series of pilots a few years ago, where different regional communities, if you will, banded together to kind of try to solve and come up with approaches for their local workforce needs. And with great success, and we'd love to see more of that. Certainly not just a domestic issue either. I think in many of the discussions we have, I think in probably every discussion I've ever participated in with colleagues from another nation or global industry, it really comes back to how do we strengthen that workforce. And there are a lot of great examples of how countries are working together or are leveraging the successful programs in one nation to try to replicate those or benefit from those in other nations as well. There are also some very kind of tactical trends, if you will, that are starting to gain momentum. They have lots of promise with the development, for example, of learning and employment records, which are very much kind of comprehensive, exchangeable digital records about things that we've learned in school, on the job, being able to capture our volunteer experiences. If you had military time or other employment, how do we capture those skills and competencies and courses and certifications and degrees and other credentials in an automated kind of portable digital record. There's a lot of pilots that are happening with organizations like IBM and the National Student Clearinghouse and different universities now to really kind of model how we can take advantage of these learning and employment records, as well as rich skill descriptors, providing more detailed content and context on what we mean as employers when we put certain phrases in cybersecurity job descriptions, for example, about what it means to be, have strong communication skills in the context of a particular job. It's kind of leveraging those to strengthen the ability for employers and employees to find each other and find good fits there as well. I think maybe the final kind of dimension on the workforce that I wanted to hit on is really this notion of diversity and inclusivity. And I think this has to be part of our collective strategy to address kind of the workforce gap and really develop and improve the solutions to both the challenges that we face in the cybersecurity space. And when I think about diversity and inclusivity, it's not just about it includes the backgrounds of people that work in cybersecurity, but it's not just the computer scientists and the engineers, but it's also, like I mentioned before, the human factors and the usability specialists, the ethicists, the privacy, the lawyers, the acquisition folks. But it's beyond that. It's both the formal and experiential learners, folks that come from a formal educational background versus those that kind of had, years or career of on-the-job training, or maybe self-taught. How do we take advantage of those capabilities? But it's also having, being responsive to and understanding of the different cultural and social backgrounds, across all demographics and all walks of life. And around the world, when you think about the cultural differences in how we view cybersecurity and privacy versus how other cultures may, we have to have an understanding of those and have a workforce that has that understanding, so that the types of standards and guides and products and services that we're producing that are intended to have a global use and adoption are things that will relate in those different cultural understandings. And in this, we try to live by this as well. We have computer scientists, we have engineers, we have social scientists, all different walks of life and all different ways of kind of viewing demographics. as well. But this also has to include kind of diversity of our approach. And we try to take a very purposeful one with respect to how we engage the community at NIST. Heavy reliance on getting public input to standards and guidance. We recognize that while we have great technical experts and expertise, we want to help get smarter. We want us to get smarter. We want the real experiences of the operational folks in different sectors and organizations and lay users, if you will, to really inform the development. And we do this through a lot of different ways, through public comment periods on our resources, through competitions, through just other ways to engage the public through workshops and those types of things. All of those as mechanisms to inform what we do, take the input from the community, and really help to produce resources that are very relevant and will more likely, I should say, be adopted by the organizations that need them most. So maybe a few closing thoughts. I know I get a little long-winded at times. Hopefully I have some time for questions. So how do we prepare for what's next? I mean, how do we make this real? So I think a few thoughts. Look, none of us have a crystal ball. I certainly don't. But I think some of the themes that I've touched on tonight, really, viewing cybersecurity in context. Again, it's viewing it in the context of not just cybersecurity for the sake of cybersecurity, but really cybersecurity in the context of a mission, of a business objective. Again, whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit, a higher education or K-12, whether you're a government agency or the government as a whole, any layer of government or a nation. Viewing it through the lens of the mission that you have, the business objective that you're trying to achieve. And that's critically important for the current and future workforce, as well as understanding, what the purpose is, what those mission and business objectives are, so that you can be most responsive and relevant in that space. We got to emphasize collaboration and sharing. I think this is such a cross-cutting challenge area of cybersecurity. Again, it impacts federal agencies and state and local governments. It impacts academia. It impacts all industries and market segments and consumers in other countries. And at the same time, it's a national security issue. It's a homeland security issue. It's economic security. It's law enforcement. It's technology. It's people. And it's an innovation opportunity all at the same time. And it requires that combination of technology and people and policy and legal tools. And with such a diverse and complex space, we really have to collaborate and share. Even just sharing of best practices goes a long way. A best practice for you as your organization could be the starting point for another organization that's really early on in their journey to improving their cybersecurity. We can't forget the human. We've talked about kind of embracing the human dimension in the system, really championing the human, as some of my usable cybersecurity colleagues like to say. It's critically important. Need to embrace diversity, especially in the diversity of all types, and really not just embrace, but I think demand it. It will strengthen the tools and the capabilities and the solutions that we produce by having that diversity of that demographic diversity, as well as that diversity of education and experience, to make those all the more relevant. And again, maybe in closing, we have to anchor in trust in the technologies, trust in the process, and really trust in the people. I think those are critically important, and many of which are reasons why I continue to be an optimist in this space. So with that, I think there's a handful of minutes left. So again, I thank you very much for your time and attention. And April, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Stein. That was a very encouraging message that I think many of us needed to hear tonight. So thank you for that. And again, I would like to reiterate Provost Ricker's comments early on. We are so grateful for the generous support from John and Janet Cotton, really making this event possible for us. So we do have some questions, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm trying to pick and choose here because we have about a dozen questions. The first one, because it's fairly timely, is in light of recent events, is it possible to conduct elections securely via the internet or fully electronically? Is this an area of investigation, or should it be? And when could such a system be developed?
So great question. This is a fascinating area, and an area, election security is an area that we've been involved in a long time in NIST. At this point, I do not believe we are comfortable promoting or advocating for internet-based security, internet-based voting, I'm sorry. But certainly, frequently there is an increase in the adoption of different election technologies, voting systems, and broader parts of the election infrastructure. I think those are important capabilities and important tools that can be brought to bear to help improve the security and the efficiency of the election process. Certainly, much of our research is taking a look at the underlying standards and best practices that are necessary to improve the use of voting systems and voting technologies to really help improve there. Great question.
A very tactical one. Do you use a password manager yourself? What can we all do to protect ourselves at home and beyond?
So yes, I do use a password manager, but I'd say the advice I would give broadly is we want to do the best we can to not use passwords anymore. We want to move to stronger forms of authentication. So whether it's smart cards or other types of hardware and software tokens or other types of authenticators, I think that's certainly the direction we'd love to see folks go in. Easier said than done, especially when you think about the usability dimension. It's one thing for your organization to embrace those different types of technologies and alternate methods beyond passwords. But I think when you think about that over the entirety of a nation, for example, or just a much larger customer base, I think there's a lot of different approaches we can take if you're going to use passwords to really just enhance those in a way, using other out-of-band mechanisms to really improve the security of those, and quite honestly, the usability as well.
This one's a bit more technical. You may need to translate this a bit for the rest of the audience. Is the Institute looking at blockchain technology as a possible answer to some of the questions regarding a trustless environment?
So blockchain is very simply put, and maybe not as simply put as possible, a digital ledger technology, if you will. I think we are doing research on blockchain in the context of just blockchain in general, as well as in the context of potential different application spaces, whether it be in healthcare or advanced manufacturing, for example. What are the opportunities to leverage blockchain and kind of digital ledger technology? I think much of our early research has been really around demystifying blockchain. That term is thrown around quite a bit, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what it is and what problems it's trying to solve. It certainly is an area of emerging technology and approach that we're taking a hard look at, both in the context of foundational research as well as in potential application spaces. And I know many in industry are doing the same as well. So it's an exciting area.
And in light of the time, I will end with this thought or question for you, Mr. Stein. What has been the most difficult cyber challenge you have had to tackle in all of your years of experience in the field? And given the title of your talk, what do you count as your greatest success?
I think one of the greatest challenges, and I'm sure I could think about some technical challenge that I've experienced, but I'll go rather to kind of just some of the challenges I talked about tonight, which is really that communication gap, that communication divide. Whether I was early in my career or maybe middle career, I'll say middle career now, a little bit more seasoned, if you will. Communication around cybersecurity has always been a challenge, not just for me, but I think for the cybersecurity community in general. So I'd say that's probably the biggest issue that continues to challenge all of us. Could you repeat the second part of that as well? I'm sorry.
Given the title of your talk today and its emphasis on optimism, what do you count as your greatest success or achievement during your career in the field?
So I think one of the greatest things, and it really gets to this, how we embrace collaboration and the kind of bringing a community together around a hard problem. Just a handful of years ago, we were directed at NIST by I guess 2 administrations ago to pull the broader critical infrastructure community together. And you think about critical infrastructure and the diversity there of healthcare and energy and chemical facilities and advanced manufacturing and nowadays election infrastructure as well, 16 or 17 different sectors, all with different mission and business objectives, all with different levels of capability, if you will, and including in their degree, their embrace of technology. And we were directed to develop what's now commonly referred to as the NIST cybersecurity framework. What is the common language that we can have that can help to bridge some of these communication divides and help us all across all the different sectors understand at a very high level what are some of the key cybersecurity outcomes and approaches that we need to take to improve the security of critical infrastructure. The process that we used was such an open and transparent one, and we engaged so many in the community across not only individual sectors, but all the sectors well outside of the critical infrastructure space as well across the entire country and quite honestly around the world. So much, in fact, that it's been alive and is continuing to be adopted, globally. And it's even, and this is a sign of success, if you will, for NIST, that output, that framework that we developed, because it continues to see tremendous global adoption by companies, by countries, by different sectors, has actually migrated into an international standard that will achieve even greater adoption and interest from countries and organizations all around the world. It's been tremendously gratifying. And I think our ability to do that was very much possible because of the 40 some odd years of cybersecurity work that we have done at NIST, that foundational research and engaging with communities in new and different ways, and kind of that trust relationship that we've established over the years made that success a possibility, and we continue to kind of benefit from it.
Wonderful. Well, with that, we would like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Students, I know you have a busy week, so thank you all for coming and also for attending the previous private event with Mr. Stein. And again, last but not least, Mr. Stein, thank you so much for spending this hour with us and giving us all a little bit more hope where cybersecurity is concerned.
Absolutely. Thank you, April. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it.